Our government institutions have never been bigger. They've never been more expensive, and they've never been less efficient. We're going to hear from Jon Stewart. We're going to hear about the FEMA disaster and the inefficiency of government. And we need a massive reform. I'm John Mike Keene.
Ma'am, how would you score yourself in this response to Helene?
I think that there
would
is
you,
always...
Would you score yourself outstanding? Would you score yourself outstanding, meets standards, or does not meet standards?
I am incredibly proud of the work that the 22,000 members of this workforce have done to support the American people across 6 states impacted by one of the most catastrophic events in recent years.
How can she be proud of what they did? At some point, you have to say, I know you moved your vans around and moved your people around to help, but you were 3 days late. People are still recovering from Helene. They're still suffering. They're still in trouble. This attitude is what people despise about our government. It's defensive. It's designed to protect a status quo that is not working.
The election that we just had was a repudiation of the status quo. An overly regulated system that is no longer responsive or delivering for the needs of the people.
That's from liberal Jon Stewart. I don't think he's a Trump supporter, but I think he's going to like what Trump is going to do for the government if he says that the status quo and a non-responsive government is the problem. He ought to be for the biggest reformation of our government in recent history.
Or their beloved beheaded squirrels. Oh, R.I.P. Peanut. Government is theoretically a constitutional system of checks and balances between equally powerful branches. But what government actually is an overly complicated Byzantine bureaucratic maze of rules, loopholes to those rules, and norms.
So by design, they're getting around the demand for excellence, even as a goal. Like, even if you fail to be excellent, your goal should be excellent. And instead, they're defending mediocrity, bloated, expensive, corrupt in many instances. This is why we voted them out of office.
Administrator, we had 2 members of Congress that would challenge you on that statement. The American citizens needed you at the time. They needed you, and they're still needing you, for 3 days. I mean, we had a major disaster in Minnesota. We had a governor for 3 days that watched Minneapolis burn. That's unacceptable, simply unacceptable. And I would just hope that, as we go forward, I don't want to politicize this. I mean, there's enough. But your response, you're the leader. The buck stops with you.
I agree with not politicizing it. This isn't Democrats versus Republicans. This is human beings against suffering. And I don't care what party it is. In fact, the Republican Party, as a check and a balance, has largely failed to successfully check and balance the Democrat Party up until this last election. And it's time to let this last election, let the people be heard and go and reform all this garbage. But this lady at FEMA cannot admit a fault. None of us can be good enough for each other. None of us can do enough good for each other. Our government's attitude should be that for how much money we spend and how many employees there are, it's unacceptable what has happened by every institution. And I'm talking about the failures. There's more institutions than just the government. We can go down that long list of government inefficiencies and failures. The FBI, the IRS, the Secret Service, FEMA is another one. Anything that the government is in charge of, it is doing an unacceptable job. There's other institutions that fail us. The Pope, pastors, university presidents that defended the attack of Jewish students, making an unsafe place. All these businesses that went for DEI standards, political correctness, instead of making a good product, having merit-based, quality-based standards. The military, the Pentagon, it's not good enough, and it's getting to a point that it's okay to call it out as unacceptable. And if you're part of the system that says, no, we have to keep doing this, then you are wrong and you need to be fired or voted out of office.
From the testimony I heard here from the representatives of the people, it was disappointing. Do you think you could have done better?
I encourage you, Congressman, to read my written testimony, which describes in detail how we were on the ground before the disaster happened. And I respect the testimony of the two panel members earlier.
Do you think you could have done better?
We can always improve, and we will review all
Is that a
our
yes?
response efforts.
Is that a yes?
Nobody is perfect.
And now that's a passive aggressive statement. Nobody's perfect. The standard is not, well, the standard is perfection. God has the only standard, which is perfection, and all fall short of that standard. But it's not appropriate to hide behind that when you do something mediocre and say, no, hey, nobody's perfect, as if anyone is even close to even doing a good job. We're looking at just good enough, like the minimum standard. By the minimum standard, they have failed. She should be very sorry. She should be repentant.
Congressman, we can always improve, and we strive to always improve on the.
Do you think you could have done better, though? Yes?
We can always do better.
She essentially says, we'll try our best. And that's what failures do, to make excuses. They go, well, I did my best. Our best in this case, if that's the best, this whole thing needs to be gutted and reformed. This whole thing needs to go away. And I mean, wipe it all clean, fire everyone, build it back from the ground up. Because if you're defending that and saying this is our best, that's a shame. And that's not American. America doesn't believe that. As Patton said, America despises a loser and a failure and a quitter. I'm John Mike Keene.